Hello everyone, in this video I'll be showing you the best longsword build in Wuchang Fallen Feathers. I'll be breaking down the best skill tree, spells, what weapons and armor to use, and everything related to using the longsword in Wuchang. Now, the longsword is one of the strongest weapons in the game because it has great reach with the Lashing Whip. It deals good amounts of damage as well. It's got that fast charge heavy attack which can break bosses' posture, especially if you're going with a behind the back attack. And overall, I think it has some of the best abilities in the game with things like the Flamebringer cheesing some of the bosses in this game. As far as weapons go, these two can beat the entire game. I've been through it already with all the secret bosses and in New Game Plus. And the Lashing Whip is one of the best weapons in the game. Now, whenever you use the Poise Break Temperance, it's actually going to boost up the damage on the second and fifth attack of this weapon. The thing is, Poise Break isn't as what you think it would be. It's actually going to be like a bleed status, which will deal damage if you trigger it. So it can be really good on this weapon, but I like some other elements depending on what the boss is weak to. And Flamebringer, the big thing about Flamebringer is you can apply a Flame Temperance to it and do a huge attack. So this weapon actually can only use the fire temperaments, but it buffs it up so much, and especially the bosses that are weak to fire. So the Infernal Firebrand here is this weapon attack, and you shoot out fireballs. If you hug the boss while you're doing it, all the fireballs will hit the boss, and it'll sometimes stack up the entire stack of bleed or burn. And what burn does is it makes the target take more damage, and it'll do a big burst of damage. So it's actually a very powerful weapon against a few different boss fights in the game, like the Tiger and one of the final bosses. Now, the best armor set in the game for most fights is going to be the Ghost Warrior Helm. You can buy this from Wuchang whenever you get to a certain point in the game. And for the most part, you're going to want to use in the early game, like the Ming armor, or really anything that's got the highest. Both slashing and stabbing are going to be very common damage types, so blunt also is quite important. Although I went for most of the game using the Fang Ling dressed. I found that that one worked pretty well too with the feathering defense. It just depends on the boss and the damage that they deal. But this one, for most fights, is going to give you the most slashing and piercing resistance. You can see there it blocks 28.5 and 26% of both slashing and stabbing respectively. As for pendants, the Jade Tiger pendant here is really nice, increasing the potency of your weapon physical attacks. Just makes sense. And also the Nameless Eye, reducing damage taken, also quite nice. The Dracolich pendant here you get in the early game reduces the damage you take, but also you don't get stunned by beast roars, which can be actually devastating to get hit with. In there's actually a lot of bosses that have that in the game. Now, there's other ones that'll increase your spell damage and your weapon's feathering damage, depending on what you else add in as extra to your build. These can be nice too, like the Sun pendant increasing potency of spells. For bosses, some of them we want to be using our spells more, so this can be really effective against those. And when you're leveling, the Lifesteal pendant is good, but it's terrible against bosses. Into spells, the most powerful spell is the Echo of Bo Magus here. What this does is it basically is going to create a bubble around our character, so when we cast this, we can use one of the abilities that's going to make it so we can't be interrupted, and then we can get hit multiple times with attacks. This allows us to use the leech temperaments on our weapon and just continually spam R1 and basically take down enemies because we become basically you can't get hit with grabs and things like that. Another good spell is the Ethereal form, so this makes it so you dodge the next attack and it's active for 5 seconds. Not as good as the Echo of Bo Magus, but it's really easy to get in the mid game, so that's useful. And then with things like the Echo Lu Bing Zhang, this is something you get early in the game, and it can actually cheese bosses like Hong Lang, because you use this and you jump back and you can trigger Alacrity if you're attacked while casting. And the same with Burning Flames. For targets that are weak to fire, as mentioned, you're going to want to use this alongside the Flamebringer. So those are some really good ones. Use the Plume Branches. These give you 5 stacks of Skyborn Might, and you can get them by invoking at a shrine, so you should be doing that often. And you can see here the Invoke ability. Go and do it. It gives you extra damage, and then you also get a lot of these items, which basically become infinite at this point. And for Temperament, I like to use the Strength and Agility, and anything that's going to buff up our damage after doing it. So this one increase the attack power from tempering, and there's one that increases the status, so that's another good option you can go with as well. Now for the skill tree for Longsword, I'm going to go through this in level, so I got up to level 116 here, so we'll be going through the best leveling. I would recommend actually going to the left-hand side first. You do need the mana capacity, so always buff these out as much because they don't actually use your red mercury. Then we're going to go ahead here, and the first thing we want to be taking, the Alacrity here. So you can get a Skyborn Might whenever you get hit while using certain spells, and that's extremely useful. And then we can continue along down here to give ourselves even more heals. And it's good to, at some point, like once you get enough heals, to actually first go down this longsword skill tree, get the weapon upgrades too, because these are free if they won't use your red mercury. And the first one we want to grab is the sword counter. Always make sure that we have this equipped on our weapons here, as this is a good skill until we get the crescent arc later on. Why this is useful, also grab these two here, is because Hong Lang, one of the hardest bosses at the start of the game, is actually pretty weak if we parry her, so this will help out with keeping the posture damage build up on the enemies, and then we can retaliate with attacks also. After this, I would actually recommend going down, and there's a few different options that we can go with. Some bosses are really weak to different statuses here, so we could go with like the increased burn from spells if you're using the fire spell, but otherwise we want to go here and then grab one of the most powerful abilities in the game with the Bone Needle Leech. This makes it so our attacks will life heal for us, so we attack the enemy, we get our health back. This can make some of the fights a little bit more easy because you don't have to constantly be healing yourself and using up a flask charge when sometimes just a couple attacks would do it, especially with the Lashing Whip, which has that increased range. You can apply that really easily. Also, there's Magic and Arcane, which 2 bosses in the game are actually really weak to these, so you can use that against the respective bosses. Otherwise, as mentioned, Poise Break's great on the Lashing Whip, so you could go up here. I also like to go with the when above 50% mana, Temperance accelerates his effects on your weapons. And then this one above 50% magic, Skyborn Might cost while casting Echo type spells reduced by 1. This allows us to do the Echo of Bo Magus with 2 Skyborn Might, which is a really useful dodging attack, and it also deals quite a bit of damage with our Feathering skill up high. Now we can also go here and make sure that we get the +1 to Temperaments, and then also unlock the Acupoints, which allows us to buff up our Temperaments even further, which also further increases the damage of our weapon. And by this point, I think it's actually best to return back to our skill tree here. If you really want to build around tempering or feathering, you can go down this route, but I think it's actually best to go down here, buff up our weapon even further, and then there's the +5 vitality that helps a lot, and then the +5 to strength. And then we can make our way down to grabbing, it's only a single upgrade to our weapon, that's likely the last one you want to grab, so you could even continue going down to this path here, and then take our way over. We want to go down here, grabbing agility for more weapon damage, and eventually make our way here to the Crescent Arc. This is a really useful skill. The reason it's so good is because with the Crescent Arc, it's a dodge. It's kind of like Bloodhound's Finesse. So you drop backwards, you get Shimmer, which basically evades the attack, and then you can follow it up if you grab these 2 here. So you get a light attack chain, or you can also do a special attack here with these if you press the same button twice. Crescent Arc is much better than the Crescent Moon, just a heads up there. And at this point, we can buff up our weapon, grab the Swordmaster, the 5th attack on Longsword light attack grabs 2 stacks of Skyborn Might if it hits an enemy. This is extremely useful when paired with this one, which gives the Clash, so you can just spam your R1 a lot more. I found myself not using charged heavies as much as in other games, just traditionally if you're at the backside of an enemy. You can then also buff up the endurance there a little bit further, it just gives you more dodging. Then we want to continue down this skill tree here. So again, grabbing the Bone Needle Leech, which is super useful, and then these are okay. They only use Blow Blood, so you can use both of these if you really want to, but it's not a big deal. It doesn't really impact the skill tree. Skyborn Might increase our Skyborn Might stacks, which is really good. And this one here, Skyborn Resilience. So when we cast the Echo of Bo Magus, this allows us to also cast it without getting interrupted. There's also the demon fights that we have later on in the game, and you can see that exact spell there. I have a guide on how to beat those enemies. This is essential because they'll attack you and try to knock you down, but this will stun them. So if you get this spell off, it's really useful. Impact can be good if we have high feathering. When above 50% madness, you have increased feathering attack damage, which is nice. We're going to further go down and get our extra Temperaments charge, and then get the extra flask, which can make a big difference at this point in the game. Once you get to the left-hand side, you got a choice. You have either magic or feathering. It depends on what you're using. So different spells are going to use different stats. For most of the game, I was going with the feather type. These 2 are others, so they don't use any casting, but you see here, Echo Looping Zang is a feathering, so if a boss was weak to this, I was using this, and if the boss was weak to magic, I would respec and use magic. Now, there's one nice thing about the skill tree is that you can respec at any time just a single node. So let's say we cast up here, we don't want this anymore, we can then remove these 2 nodes and then build into there. So depending on the boss, sometimes magic is extremely useful. Taking these side ones gives a +5. And then we always want to make our way down, more Acupoints to buff up our weapons, nice. And then we have buffs. These are late game options, so I wouldn't really touch these until a bit later in the game. But you can always just go ahead here and grab these buffs. This will give you a buff on deflecting. We should also take that whenever we're using the sword counter ability. And then we can grab this here, giving the increased health above 90% madness, which is nice. And this will make it so the biding time stacks go down a little slower. At this point, we want to try and finish off the skill tree as much as possible, taking agility here to buff up our overall damage. And as we get into the higher levels, we can actually go into some other skill trees. Now, for Benedictions, there's actually a few that are really useful. So to get massive amounts of damage, if we put all 3 masteries, the Oath Way, Tri Disciplinary Force, 6 Disciplinary Force, and 9 So we increase damage when we have 3, 6, and 9 disciplines, and then we have one that when we have 12. We want to unlock as many disciplines for other weapons as possible. At base, you have 5, so you have 1 for each of the weapon types, and then the more you unlock, the more you get buffed up on your weapon. Having 2 of these benedictions equipped will actually give you a plus 55% damage, and then the furthermore you stack them up, really enhances your damage. So I'd recommend grabbing those, and then we're going to try and get some more off different skill trees. 2 really good ones if you want to increase your overall strength and agility. The axe will have a lot of strength and vitality and endurance. The spear will have a nice split of both, so you can go with the spear here, plus 5 strength, plus 5 agility, and then you can go ahead with grabbing some of the skills here if you want to grab more of their skills. But what we can also do if you have the benediction there is just go and grab some of these skills that we won't use, so you just leave them unequipped. And there's one down at the bottom of this tree. You do have to take the feathering up, so it might be better to go with one of the other skill trees here. So we can go up to the one-handed swords, and then it has its own skill tree, which gives you the plus 5 to magic. If you go to the bottom, it's more feathering focus. Then we take off this ability here, and you can go up to grab another skill over here with higher magic. It just depends if you want to go magic or feathering at this point. But I think the best choices are continuing up on some of these here. Like this will give us a plus 5 to agility, and then you can just grab these skills as you are able to afford them here. But the plus 5 endurance and vitality just helps with survivability. So some of those early ones you want to fill out there. So this will put you at around level 100. After you get past 100, we're just going to be grabbing as many disciplines as possible. So you want to take these up and then grab the discipline. Don't use them. They're just there to buff up our further our weapon damage. So yeah, as you continue to keep leveling up, just keep grabbing those as the damage that you get out of them is pretty crazy. So that is the skill tree and benedictions. Let me know your thoughts. If you have any questions regarding this build in Wuchang Fallen Feathers, feel free to let me know. I'm just transmogging my outfit too here. That's why I have the panda hat on. But if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. And let me know your favorite build in Wuchang Fallen Feathers. Hit the subscribe button below if you haven't already. Hope you have a great day. We'll catch you in the next video.